I didn't expect a porch swing to start a war. But looking back, maybe that was the first sign that this place was never really a neighborhood. It was a stage for people who needed control more than they needed peace. Before I get into it, let me ask you something real quick. Where are you watching from? Drop your city, your state, your country. I actually want to know who's hearing this. Alright, let's start. My name's Caleb. I moved into this neighborhood because I wanted quiet. Not the type of quiet that comes from isolation, but the good kind, where you can hear your coffee mug set down on the porch railing, where neighbors wave not because they have to, but because they genuinely see you. Yeah. That kind of peace. So when I bought the place, I already had one thing in mind: a porch swing. There was this exact swing at my grandparents' farm when I was a kid. White wood, thick rope, slow, gentle sway like time didn't matter. So after moving in, I spent a Saturday building one myself. Cut the boards smooth, measured the rope lengths, sanded everything down until my hands were covered in sawdust. Hung it up, sat down, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Then they showed up. Not one person, not a friendly neighbor, the HOA. Or more specifically, the woman who was the HOA. Her name was Marlene, and I swear to you, she walked like she believed the entire neighborhood owed her rent for existing. Short haircut, sharp glasses, clipboard like it was her badge and weapon at the same time. She didn't say hello, didn't smile, didn't introduce herself, just walked straight up like I was trespassing on my own porch. That swing isn't approved. I blinked. I looked at the swing. I looked at her. I said, or maybe just thought, approved by who? She tapped the clipboard like it was scripture. The Architectural Aesthetic Compliance Committee. Let me translate that for you. A group of people who wanted to feel important more than they wanted anyone to be happy. She told me I had 10 days to remove it. Let me make something clear. I didn't come from money. I didn't come from power. But I did come from people who built things with their own hands. And when you build something with your own hands, it means something. So that swing wasn't just a decoration. It was memory. It was peace. It was mine. I calmly asked her to show me the rule. Not rumors. Not opinions. Not personal preferences. The rule. She couldn't. Not right then anyway. And that right there should have been the end of it. But no. People like her don't back down. Not because they're right, but because they don't know who they are without being in control. 3 days later, I got the letter. Violation notice. Removal of unauthorized exterior attachment. And that was the moment everything shifted. Because here's the part they didn't know. I wasn't just some guy who moved in and wanted a porch swing. I was one of the original planning consultants who worked on this entire neighborhood's layout, years before houses ever existed here. The roads, the lot spacing, the porch allowances, the building offsets, the guideline drafts. I helped write the framework they were trying to use against me. They didn't know who they were messing with yet, but they were about to. And trust me, I wasn't about to take that swing down. Not now. Not ever. The letter sat on my kitchen counter for a whole day before I even touched it. Bright white paper. Bold black print. The kind of official formatting meant to make you feel small. I didn't throw it out. I didn't react. I didn't even get angry. I just sat back on my porch swing and rocked. Slow, steady, calm. Because here's the thing. People who rush to fight usually lose. People who wait, watch, and understand, they win. The next morning, I walked down to the HOA office, which, let's be honest, was just a spare room in the community center with a desk and a printer that jammed twice a day. Inside were 3 board members. Marlene, the self-appointed queen of control. Jeff, bald dude with sunglasses on his head 24/7, even indoors. Linda, the type who smiles while stabbing you through paperwork. They looked up like I was interrupting state business. I set the violation notice on the table and said, calm as the morning wind, I'm going to need the bylaw number this notice is based on. Their faces told me everything. Marlene puffed up like a cat sizing itself to look bigger. It's in the architectural guidelines, which was a fancy way of saying we made that up and hoped you wouldn't ask. So I leaned forward just a bit. Not aggressive, just steady. Then show me. She opened a binder so thick it could have doubled as a weapon. flipped pages hard like she wanted the paper to feel her authority. I waited. She flipped, and flipped, and flipped. Her face tightened. I knew exactly why. Because there was no rule about porch swings. Not in the bylaws. Not in the charter. Not in any revision or addendum. Jeff finally cleared his throat. It's more of an aesthetic expectation. We like the neighborhood to look consistent. Consistency. Huh? Alright. Time for a lesson. This subdivision was designed with front-facing community elements. Porches, sitting spaces, shaded front lawns, because the original plan emphasized neighbor interaction. In short, porch swings are literally part of the intended community design. I said it plainly. No flexing. No bragging. Just the truth. Jeff blinked like I had spoken a different language. Linda leaned back in her chair, the only one smart enough to realize something had shifted. But Marlene? Oh no. She doubled down. Well, regardless, the board has decided that the swing is not acceptable. There it was. Not law. Not policy. Not guidelines. Ego. So I nodded once. All right. Then I'd like to submit a formal document request. Now that got their attention. Because formal requests mean records. And records mean accountability. And accountability is the one thing controlling people fear most. Linda asked quietly, "What records?" All architectural committee decisions from the past 2 years. All violation notices for exterior features. And proof of enforcement consistency across all residents. Her pen froze midair, because she knew exactly what that meant. I was looking for selective enforcement. Selective enforcement is the grenade pin of HOA law. Pull it, prove it, drop it, the board's authority can legally collapse. Marlene finally realized she wasn't talking to some guy with a swing. She was talking to someone who knew the system better than she did. But instead of backing down, she smiled. That slow, tight, "I'd rather burn the house down than admit I lost" smile. Fine. We'll gather the records. I nodded. I wasn't rushed. I wasn't angry. I was patient. Because when someone is holding on to power with their fingertips, all you have to do is wait. They'll slip. I walked out, went home, and sat back on my swing. And as I rocked, I saw blinds shift in 2 houses across the street. Neighbors watching. Not judging. Not curious. Watching like people who were waiting to see if maybe, just maybe, someone was finally going to push back. And I wasn't stopping now. Not for them. Not for the swing. But because control only works when we agree to be controlled. And I didn't agree. Not then. Not ever. 3 days passed before the board emailed me the files I requested. It wasn't efficiency. It was panic disguised as compliance. I could tell because the PDFs were scanned sideways, half-cropped, and pieced together like someone had spent an entire afternoon arguing with a printer that hated them. I printed everything out, spread the paperwork across my dining table, and what I found wasn't surprising, just confirming. They weren't enforcing the rules. They were enforcing control. House on Maple Drive, porch swing. No violation. Corner lot on Alder Way, decorative bench swing. No violation. Even Jeff's backyard patio had a hanging hammock chair. So clearly, swings themselves weren't the issue. My swing was the issue, which meant I wasn't dealing with policy anymore. I was dealing with targeting. But here's where they messed up far beyond anything they understood. This neighborhood, this layout, the spacing, the zoning categories, the community recreation design, all of it was part of a planned community development project I worked on in my early career. I wasn't just familiar with the documents. I helped write them. Not every line, not every detail, but the foundation, yeah, that was me. Back then, neighborhoods were built to encourage people to know each other. Front porches were designed for human interaction, not HOA inspection targets. The irony? They used my work to try to control me. So I pulled out my old storage boxes, the dusty ones that move with you house to house, never opened, because life changes and plans drift and years get heavy. Inside were original layout drafts, developer correspondence, meeting notes, pre-HOA formation guidelines, and the first draft architectural harmony philosophy statement. That last one was the nail in their coffin, because I remembered writing it myself, word for word, sitting in a cheap office chair eating vending machine crackers on a late Tuesday night. It said, front-facing social structures such as porch seating, swings, benches, and visible relaxation spaces are encouraged to promote neighbor interaction and community cohesion. Let me translate that into plain English. Porch swings are literally part of the neighborhood's intended design. The HOA wasn't just wrong. They were violating the original governing purpose of the neighborhood itself. I sat back in my chair and let out a slow breath. Not excitement, not anger, just clarity. This wasn't a fight anymore. This was correction. And I wasn't coming in loud. I wasn't going to yell or accuse or threaten. I was going to show up to the next board meeting calm and prepared, which is the scariest kind of prepared. The next morning I went for a walk. Same streets, same houses, but the neighborhood felt different now. People were looking at me again. But this time, not just watching. They nodded. Small, quiet nods. Like, we're rooting for you. We hope you don't back down. We wish we had spoken up sooner. A couple across the street waved. A guy mowing his yard cut the engine to say morning. Someone else left a cup of coffee on my porch table later. No note. Not applause. Just solidarity. Because when one person stands up, others start remembering their own spine. When Friday came and the next HOA meeting arrived, I didn't walk in angry. I walked in carrying a folder. Not thick. Not dramatic. Just enough. The board sat stiff, like they'd been waiting for a storm. I didn't bring a storm. I brought a mirror. I laid the original community development statement on the table. Their eyes scanned the page. I watched realization spread, slow, creeping, irreversible. They finally understood. I wasn't the guy they thought they could intimidate. I was the guy who helped build the foundation they were standing on. And they had just tried to use it against me. The board didn't say much after I laid the original development documents on the table. They didn't argue. They didn't apologize. They just stared at the papers like they were written in fire. When a group of people who are used to controlling others suddenly realizes they miscalculated, their silence becomes the loudest thing in the room. The president, Linda, cleared her throat. She always tried to sound composed. Tight voice, controlled breathing, chin up like she practiced speeches in a mirror. But this time her voice shook. We'll adjourn for now, review this documentation, and reconvene for a formal discussion on Monday. Which was code for, we're not prepared. We need time. We need to regroup. We need to figure out how to handle you. Everyone filtered out. But I didn't move fast. I let them leave first. I've learned, the person who walks out last is the one in control. The notice arrives. The next morning, there was a crisp white envelope taped to my door. Bold header, Emergency Homeowners Association Board Session, attendance required. Required. As if I was some student being called to the principal's office. I laughed. A real laugh. The kind you release when something is so absurd it circles around to being funny. They weren't backing down. They were doubling down. That's the dangerous part about people who get power they never earned. They will defend it even while drowning. The meeting. Monday night, I walked into the HOA community center. The room was crowded, more residents than usual. Word had spread. People were curious. Good. Curiosity becomes awareness. Awareness becomes pressure. Pressure changes outcomes. The board members sat at a long folding table up front. Papers neatly stacked, water bottles lined up, faces pulled tight. Linda started speaking. We have reviewed the documents Mr. Caleb provided, and while we appreciate his past involvement, the current HOA has authority to adjust rules to maintain harmony and visual consistency. I held up a hand. Not aggressively. Just enough to signal. Stop. We're not doing word games today. I walked forward slowly. Then I placed one single sheet of paper on the table in front of them. It was the Architectural Governance Clause, Section 1.3, which stated, any modification to neighborhood design guidelines must be in alignment with the original development intent and community integration objectives. Meaning, they could change rules, yes, but not in ways that contradict the foundation. And banning porch swings contradicted the foundation. Their rule wasn't legal. It was void. When I explained this clearly, calmly, the room didn't gasp. It exhaled. Like every quiet, frustrated homeowner in that room had been holding their breath for years. And then it happened. One of the board members, Jeff, the one who lived 2 streets over and always acted like he was auditioning to run a country, stood up. He pointed at me. This isn't about a swing. This is about you trying to undermine authority. There it was. The truth. Not harmony. Not aesthetics. Not neighborhood unity. Control. Plain and simple. I just stared at him, steady. If your authority depends on ignoring the rules you swore to enforce, you don't have authority. You have ego. The room reacted, soft murmurs, nods, a few yes under people's breath. Linda tried to speak again, but the board had cracked, and everyone in the room could see it. The board calls for a vote. Desperation move. Last resort. Motion to draft a revised and expanded swing restriction policy to clarify community expectations. Seconded. They were trying to rewrite the rules on the spot, in front of the people they thought would just nod along. But this time, people didn't look at them. They looked at me. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't grandstand. I just said, let's vote. All homeowners present. Silence. Because now it wasn't the board's vote. It was the community's. The room didn't move for a moment. Everyone just sat there, staring at each other, like nobody wanted to be the first to breathe wrong. See, the board expected obedience. They expected people to sit there and accept whatever they said because that's how it had always worked. But something was different now. Not because of me, but because they finally saw the cracks. The moment you realize authority can be questioned is the moment authority stops being absolute. I stepped forward just a little. Not big, not aggressive, just enough to take space. Let's keep this simple. Raise your hand if you believe porch swings, or any reasonable porch seating, should be allowed in our community. I didn't yell it, didn't hype anyone up, just said it, plain and calm. And then it happened. Hands went up. First one, then 3, then a row, then half the room, then almost the whole room. Some people raised their hands slow, like they'd been scared for years. Some raised them fast, like they'd been waiting for this moment. Even a couple of board members hesitated, eyes darting between each other, before keeping their hands down, refusing to break alliance. But the count was clear. The residents, the people who actually lived in the neighborhood, had spoken. The board president, Linda, tried to salvage it. This vote is informal and does not override board procedure. No more hiding behind structure. I stepped closer to the table. Not threatening, just unignorable. Then let's formalize it. Silence. Thick silence. The kind that changes the temperature of a room. One of the residents stood up. An older guy named Tom. Retired Army, quiet type, never liked drama. He said, "We pay dues. We live here. We built this community. We should have the right to decide how it looks." That hit harder than anything I could have said. Because it was real. The board didn't respond. They couldn't. They were losing control and they knew. So they fell back on their last defense. We will have to consult HOA legal counsel before taking any action. Translation. We need time to try to spin this. Fine. Let's play chess. I nodded. Great. Then I'll provide my documentation to your counsel as well, including development alignment clauses and precedent cases from similar communities statewide. Their faces tightened, because now they weren't just up against a resident. They were up against someone who knew the original development framework, knew the legal structure, knew how they were misusing authority, and had the community behind him. They adjourned the meeting abruptly. No closing remarks, no polite wrap-up, just panic in motion. On the way out, people stopped me on my way toward the door. Pat on the shoulder. "Thank you. We needed this. About damn time somebody said something." Not loud praise, just quiet relief. And that's when I realized, this wasn't my fight anymore. This was everyone's. That night, I sat on my porch swing, in the dark, just rocking, listening to crickets and the soft hum of the neighborhood streetlights. The wood creaked softly under me, a sound I'd heard 1,000 times. And I thought, funny how something as small as a swing can reveal the whole truth about power. The board thought they were dealing with furniture. What they were really dealing with was identity, community, freedom. People don't fight for the thing itself. They fight for what it represents. And for us, the swing represented having a home, not a jurisdiction. The board had one move left. They would not go quietly. Next, they'd try legal intimidation, violation stacking, fee increases, personal pressure tactics. Because when people in power feel it slipping away, they don't step down. They push harder. And that's exactly what they did next. The board went quiet for about a week. Not the kind of quiet where things settle. The kind of quiet where something is brewing. Then, on a Wednesday morning just after 8 a.m., I heard a soft thunk on my porch. Clipboard, camera, and the same compliance officer who always avoided eye contact. He wasn't there for a conversation. He was there to document. He snapped photos of my porch swing, photos of my mailbox, photos of my lawn edge, photos of my trash bin placement. Everything. He didn't say a word, just scribbled notes like he was recording a crime scene. That's when I knew. They were shifting strategy. If they couldn't win the porch swing fight directly, they'd try to bury me in violations. Make me look like a problem homeowner. Force fines, escalate penalties, pressure me financially until I'd cave. Classic HOA pressure tactics. He left without speaking. 5 hours later, I got the email. Notice of multiple community violations. Total fine, $775. Due in 14 days. My offenses? Grass a 1/4 inch over height limit. Porch mat labeled an unauthorized decorative obstruction. Garden light described as non-approved external illumination fixture. Trash bin reported visible from street for longer than 12 minutes after pickup. Swing listed again under non-compliant structural addition. It wasn't even subtle. It was retaliation dressed up as procedure. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the screen. Most people would panic right there. That's why these tactics work. Not because the fines are huge, but because the pressure is constant, exhausting, relentless. HOAs don't try to crush your wallet first. They try to crush your will. But here's where they made their mistake. They assumed I wasn't ready. I emailed back one sentence. I dispute all violations and request a formal review under Section 4.2 due process requirements. Because I knew Section 4.2 like I knew the back of my hand. I helped write the original due process guideline language for this community model. Which means they were required to provide time-stamped evidence. They were required to provide written justification. They were required to allow appeal. They were required to give 30 days before fines could be enforced. And they violated every single one of those requirements. But they weren't done. 2 days later, I got another notice. They scheduled a private hearing about my violations without notifying the community. Illegal, improper, and desperate. They wanted this handled quietly. They wanted a room where they controlled the narrative. But I had no intention of walking into a private room where they could twist whatever happened. So I sent one more email. Hearing must be open to homeowners per procedural transparency guidelines. I will attend with documentation. I will also bring representation. Representation. That word hit them like a brick. HOAs thrive on homeowners being alone. Defensive. Unprepared. When someone comes in with backup, they panic. Within 2 hours, I got a response. The hearing will be rescheduled to allow full community attendance. Which meant they were scared. Good. Fear meant they understood. I wasn't the one being cornered. They were. The day before the hearing. A neighbor I barely knew. Single mom, 2 kids, always tired, always polite. Stopped by my porch. She said, quietly, they did the same thing to me last year. I couldn't fight them. I'm glad someone finally is. That hit different. Because that's when I realized. This wasn't just about a swing anymore. It wasn't even about me anymore. It was about everyone who had been pushed, bullied, fined, intimidated, ignored, and controlled. This was bigger. This was a turning point. And I wasn't backing down. Not now. Not ever. The day of the hearing felt heavy, like the air itself knew something was about to break. Normally, HOA hearings are quiet, private, tucked away in some back room where the board controls the script. Not this time. Word had gotten around. When I arrived at the community center, there were already 20 people inside. Folding chairs lined in messy rows. People standing along the back wall. Some with arms crossed, some whispering, some simply watching. But the board? They came in like it was business as usual. Same matching polo shirts. Same printed agendas. Same artificial calm. Linda cleared her throat, ready to open with her typical "we're here to maintain the standards of our community" speech. But before she could even start, a hand went up from the back. Tom, the retired Army guy from earlier. Let the homeowner speak first. You would have thought someone had slapped the board president across the face. Her eyes snapped up, stiff, offended. This wasn't the order she knew. This wasn't control. But with a whole room watching, she couldn't shut it down. Fine, she said. Mr. Caleb, you may address the board. I didn't stand behind the podium they'd set up. That was their stage. I stood at the center of the room instead. So I wasn't speaking to them. I was speaking to everyone. I held up the violation notice first. These fines were issued without time-stamped evidence, without proper notification, and without due process, which violates Section 4.2 of the Community Governance Procedures. No reaction, no argument, just closed mouths and clenched jaws. Then I laid out the printed copies of the original architectural intent statements, the ones that clearly encouraged visible porch seating as a community building design choice. I didn't raise my voice, didn't rant, just placed the evidence like I was setting down playing cards. The residents leaned forward. The board leaned back. And then I said it, simple, steady, unshaken. This isn't about rules. It's about control. And it stops now. A murmur spread through the room like wind shifting direction. The board president tried to recover, flipping through her papers like she could find a rebuttal printed somewhere inside them. But there was nothing, because there was no justification for what they did. So she pivoted to the last weak defense she had. We were acting in the best interest of maintaining neighborhood standards. I stepped closer, not aggressive, just undeniable. Whose standards? Silence. For the first time, the room wasn't afraid of the board. The board was afraid of the room. Then, from the back, someone spoke. It was Mrs. Walker, sweet, quiet woman in her late 70s. They fined me $300 because my wreath wasn't the right shade of green. I cried for a week. The room didn't gasp, it tightened, like everyone had just heard the truth they'd all been carrying. Then another voice. They told me my kid's basketball hoop was a violation and threatened to tow it. Another. They tried to tell me I couldn't plant tomatoes in my own yard. Another. They made me pay $150 for having my trash can out while I was at work. Stories kept coming. Not dramatic ones. Real ones. Petty ones. The kind that wear people down slowly. And for the first time since this HOA started operating, people weren't whispering. They were saying it out loud. Linda tried to restore order. Let's please stay on topic. But the room was on topic. The topic was control. The topic was abuse of authority. The topic was them. And that's when the turning point hit. And it wasn't dramatic. One board member stood up. Jeff. The one who had pointed at me before. He didn't defend himself. He didn't defend the board. He just said, I resign. No speech. No excuses. No explanation. Just truth finally too heavy to carry. The room went still. Because that one resignation did what no argument could. Proved the board knew they had crossed the line. And now, they were losing the ability to pretend otherwise. Jeff's resignation hung in the air like smoke. No one clapped. No one cheered. People just stared because when the first brick falls, everyone knows the wall is about to come down. The board dismissed the meeting early, not because it was over, but because they had lost control of it. They retreated, heads down, whispering urgently to each other as they left through the side exit like they were avoiding a crowd. But they weren't done. People who are used to power don't walk away. They regroup and they come back meaner. The letter. 3 days later, I received a certified envelope. Not the usual printed violation slip tone. This one was formal. They always think switching fonts can make intimidation feel official. Inside was a special assessment proposal. Effective immediately, all homes in the community will be charged an additional $320 monthly fee to support legal restructuring costs. In short, because I challenged them, because I revealed they'd exceeded their authority, because the community now knew they were acting outside their scope. They were trying to make every homeowner pay for it. Financial punishment, collective retaliation, classic authoritarian pressure play. The logic behind this tactic is simple. Turn the community against me by hitting their wallets. Make it look like I caused the hardship. Make me the problem. Make them resent me. Divide and conquer. Except, the board had forgotten one critical detail. This wasn't a dictatorship. This was a non-profit organization formed by the homeowners themselves, which meant any financial assessment required transparency of budget justification, a community vote with majority approval, and documented board accountability statements. And they had none of that, so I didn't respond privately. I posted it on the community forum. Public, visible, unavoidable. The community reacts. The comments didn't trickle in. They flooded. This is retaliation. They can't do this. Where did this fee even come from? We didn't approve this. They lost and now they're punishing us. This is illegal. And then the one that sealed the momentum. We need a recall vote. Not from me. From them. Once a recall petition is signed by 51% of homeowners, the board must either step down voluntarily or face a forced removal vote. And let me tell you something. Nothing terrifies a power-drunk HOA board more than a recall, because it doesn't just remove them, it exposes them. The mobilization. I didn't organize anything. I didn't make speeches. I didn't give instructions. I didn't have to. People were knocking on doors, printing petitions, sharing documents, highlighting bylaws, talking openly in driveways, on sidewalks, in front yards, right where porch swings were supposed to be enjoyed. The board went silent again. Not the planning kind of silence this time. The oh no, the castle walls are gone kind of silence. The breaking point. A week later, the board sent out a statement. The proposed special assessment is withdrawn due to homeowner concern. Not disagreement. Not legal invalidation. Concern. That word was the surrender. Because once you retreat on your last power move, you're done. But they still thought they could ride out the storm. Still thought people would forget. Still thought control could stabilize. They didn't realize the community didn't just want a rule change. They wanted new leadership. And that's exactly where this was heading next. The recall meeting was scheduled for a Saturday morning, 10 a.m., in the same community center where everything had started. This time, the room was full. Not just the usual handful of retirees and board tagalongs. Not just the frustrated few, but everyone. Families with kids, young couples, old neighbors who'd lived here since the first house went up. People who never attended any meeting before this mess. If the HOA board thought this would blow over, they were about to learn what happens when an entire neighborhood wakes up. The board members sat behind their usual table, but they weren't wearing their matching polo shirts this time. Small detail, but revealing. Uniforms say, "We are in control." Plain clothes say, "We are hoping to look normal." Linda looked like she hadn't slept. Papers shuffled in her hands. Quick, nervous, empty movement. She opened the meeting with the same brittle tone. "We are here today to address concerns raised regarding board decisions." I didn't wait for her to finish. Not out of disrespect. Out of necessity. Because this moment wasn't about them anymore. It was about the truth. I walked to the front. No drama, no raised voice, no theatrics. Just a folder under my arm. The same folder that started all this. I placed it on the table. Then I spoke. Steady, clear, like someone laying down a blueprint. This neighborhood was designed to encourage neighbor connection. It was built with front porches, open walkways, and community-facing spaces on purpose. And I know that Because I was part of the architectural planning team that helped design it. Now that hit the room. Even people who had heard it before felt it differently now. Because now it mattered. I opened the folder and laid out original zoning notes, community cohesion directives, architectural intent statements, porch and frontage integration plans. All signed, all archived, all real. I didn't need to explain. The documents spoke for themselves. The board had not only been enforcing rules incorrectly, they had been enforcing rules that broke the foundation of the neighborhood itself. Linda's face went pale. Another board member leaned back like the chair suddenly felt unstable. The room didn't gasp. The room understood. People had been told for years that the HOA was protecting property values. But now they could see the truth. The HOA had been protecting control, not value. They had been shrinking the neighborhood's spirit, the exact opposite of what it was built for. I stepped back so the residents could see the papers clearly. Then I said, the rules are supposed to serve the community, not the other way around. The silence was thick but not hostile, just clarifying, like fog lifting. Then Tom, steady voice, steady presence, stood up again. Time for the recall vote. No speeches, no debate, no excuses. People were tired of words. Hands went up, row by row, section by section, not slowly, not nervously, but like a dam had finally given way. When the count finished, there was no question. The board was out. All of them. Not one seat survived the vote. Linda looked down at her papers, the same papers she had once wielded like authority, and for the first time in all these weeks, she looked small. She stood, gathered her purse, and walked out. No statement, no defense, no goodbye, just gone. The room didn't cheer. It simply exhaled. Because the victory wasn't explosive. It was earned, measured, solid, the kind that lasts. Now the neighborhood had a choice. Who leads next? Once the old board walked out, the room didn't burst into applause. No cheering, no celebration. Because this wasn't a victory moment. This was a crossroads. Removing power is the easy part. What you build afterward is what matters. The recall guidelines required we form an interim committee, temporary leadership, until an election could be held. Normally, this would be the moment where the loudest voices tried to grab control. But nobody wanted another version of the same problem. People didn't want rulers. They wanted neighbors. So instead of nominating volunteers from the front of the room, we started by asking, who here is willing to listen? That changed everything. A few hands went up. Quiet people. The kind that don't crave attention. A teacher. A retired accountant. A nurse. A young dad who just wanted peace in the cul-de-sac. People who had lives, not agendas. They formed the temporary leadership group. 5 people, not 1. Then came the real work. 1. Reviewing every policy. We brought out the full HOA rule book. Not the pamphlet mailed out when people moved in. The full binder, the one they never showed anyone. Page by page, we highlighted petty violations, arbitrary aesthetic restrictions, rules designed only to generate fines. And every time we found a rule that didn't protect safety or property value, we tagged it for removal, because a neighborhood should feel like home, not a probation office. 2. Rewriting the purpose. We didn't start by writing rules. We started by writing principles. Respect neighbors. Ask before escalating. Solve small issues with conversation, not paperwork. Community first, enforcement last. It was the opposite of how the old board operated, which frankly was the point. 3. The front porch swing clause. This was symbolic and everyone in the room knew it. We added one line to the revised architectural guidelines. Front porch swings, benches, and visible seating are encouraged as expressions of hospitality and community connection. Encouraged, not tolerated, not exempted, encouraged, because the porch swing wasn't the problem. The porch swing was the heart. It represented belonging, rest, neighbors waving to neighbors, the America people missed. 4. Public meetings only. No more private hearings. No hidden votes. No decisions made in whispers or back rooms. From now on, all board meetings were open. Budgets were published monthly. All fines required community approval. It wasn't just transparency. It was preventing power from rotting the organization again. During all of this, people came to my house almost daily. Not to ask me to lead, just to talk, to sit, to think, to remember what the neighborhood used to feel like. My porch swing was rarely empty. Funny how something so small became the symbol of everything we fought for. It needed shared ownership. So when the election came, I didn't want to run for the board. Not because I didn't care, but because the neighborhood didn't need another authority. It needed shared ownership. So when the election came, I didn't put my name on the ballot, but I stood behind the people who did. People who walked dogs in the evenings. People who waved before they spoke. People who didn't want to control anything, just maintain fairness and peace. The vote was unanimous. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like the community could breathe. It wasn't perfect. No neighborhood ever is. But we had taken something that had been twisted into power and returned it to people. And that is where real strength lives. The morning after the election felt different. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just calm. For the first time in a long time, I stepped outside without bracing myself for some notice taped to my door, or a neighbor whispering about board drama. The air just felt lighter. I sat on my porch swing, the same swing that started all of this, and listened to the sound of the neighborhood waking up. Lawn sprinklers ticking, dogs barking at absolutely nothing, someone's radio playing low from an open garage. Sounded like home again. A few minutes later, the young dad from 2 houses down walked by with his stroller. He raised his hand to wave. Not a forced, awkward wave like before, but a real one. The kind you don't think about. The kind that means we're good. He said morning. I said morning back. That's it. And that was enough. Small change, big shift. The new board had their first meeting the following week. Not in the HOA office, not behind a locked door, but on folding tables in the community park pavilion. Kids ran around playing tag while the adults talked. People brought snacks, not arguments. The sun hadn't set yet because the meeting didn't drag until midnight anymore. Everything was just normal. They reviewed landscaping updates, approved repairs to the neighborhood fountain, discussed a plan for a spring block party. No tension, no threats, no power tripping, just neighbors working on neighbor things. It felt almost unreal to see how quickly things can shift when ego gets removed from the equation. The swing becomes a landmark. A couple weeks later, I noticed something new. More porch swings. Not all the same style. Some wood, some metal, some with pillows that didn't match. Didn't matter. People were choosing connection, not the rulebook. One evening, I overheard a conversation while walking past an older couple's house. Honey, I've always wanted one. Let's just do it. The new board doesn't care. They didn't know I was the guy who fought for it. Didn't matter. That wasn't the point. The point was freedom had returned. No one was afraid anymore. I realized it fully one Saturday morning. A group of kids had drawn chalk hopscotch patterns on the sidewalk. Big, colorful ones that stretched across 3 driveways. Before, the HOA would have sent a warning. Sidewalk must remain uniform appearance. Temporary markings not approved. Now, adults stepped around the drawings with smiles. One old guy even joined the game for a minute. He missed the jump, laughed at himself, and kept walking. The fear was gone. Do you know how much damage fear quietly does to people? It shrinks them, turns neighbors into strangers, turns homes into checkpoints. When the fear left, people came back to life. The neighborhood cookout. The new board hosted a cookout that spring. Nothing fancy, just burgers, hot dogs, folding chairs, and everyone bringing something to share. Kids splashed in the sprinklers. Someone brought a speaker and played old country road trip songs. People talked like they'd known each other for years, even if they were meeting for the first time. I watched from the edge for a while, just observing. Then the nurse, one of the new board members, waved me over. Caleb, come sit. This is your community too. I joined the table. And for the first time since I moved in, I didn't feel like a problem, or a target, or a holdout. I felt like a neighbor. Peace isn't loud. Peace doesn't announce itself. It's in how slow you sip your morning coffee, how you don't double-check your mailbox for warnings, how people talk softer because they're not defending themselves anymore. This wasn't a dramatic victory. It was something quieter, something steadier, something earned. The neighborhood didn't just look like home again. Felt like it. A few months passed. Life settled. Routine returned in the best way possible. Then one afternoon, I opened my mailbox and saw a white envelope with no return address. The handwriting was familiar. Sharp, tight letters, written by someone who always wanted their lines straight and their world controlled. It was Margaret, the former HOA president. I didn't open it right away. I just held it for a minute. There was a time when anything from the HOA would make my stomach twist, like I was already in trouble for something I didn't know I'd done. Funny how your body remembers things long after your mind lets go. I sat down on my porch swing, the same one that had nearly become a symbol of disobedience, and opened the envelope. Inside was a letter. No threats, no legal jargon, just words. She explained that after stepping down, the HOA from another neighborhood had offered her a position, a consulting role, basically teaching new boards how to enforce regulations efficiently. She took it. Of course she did. But then, something happened. People pushed back there too. Different circumstances, different personalities. Same problem. She was forced out. Again. She said she had been sitting in her car in a strip mall parking lot when she realized something. It wasn't the neighborhoods. It wasn't the boards. It was her. Her need to control. Her need to perfect things. Her belief that community only worked if someone was in charge of it. She wrote that stepping down wasn't humiliation. It was the first real silence she'd had in years. The quiet scared her enough to start listening. She said she finally understood the swing. Not the wood. Not the hardware. Not the aesthetic. But what it represented. People feeling welcome where they live. The part that hit me hardest was near the end. She said, I never built a community. I built compliance. And you were right to stop me. I sat back against the swing and just let the moment settle. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't even feel vindicated. I just felt human. Because here's the truth. Revenge is loud. But closure is quiet. And I finally had closure. I didn't respond right away. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I didn't want to speak from the past. I wanted to speak from the present. A week later, I wrote her back. Short, simple, honest. I said that neighborhoods are families. Messy, loud, stubborn, imperfect families. And families don't need rulers. They need caretakers. I told her I hoped she found peace, not power. She never wrote back. She didn't need to. Sometimes understanding is enough. Life now. The neighborhood is good. Not perfect, just good. Couple lawns get a little wild sometimes. A few houses mismatch their holiday lights. Someone paints their shutters a color nobody asked for. And no one cares. Because people wave more. Talk more. Laugh more. Porch swings are everywhere. And every time I walk past one, I smile. Not because I won. But because we changed something. Not just rules. Culture. And that is harder to break than any HOA fine. If you're watching this right now, this part is for you. Whatever you're going through, whatever system is trying to shrink you, whatever person is trying to tell you your home belongs to them, remember, you are allowed to exist freely in the place you live. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to have peace. Never let anyone convince you that comfort is a privilege. Comfort is a right. So tell me, where are you watching from? I'm Caleb. This was my story, and I'm glad you were here for it.